Hello, New Mexico, and welcome to another episode of Around the Roundhouse, the New Mexicans podcast featuring the policies, politics, and personalities of the state capitol during the 60-day session. My name is Daniel Chacón, and I'm the state government reporter for the New Mexican. Every week, my colleagues and I will be bringing you the latest news and information from the Roundhouse, as well as recapping the highlights and sharing interviews with key political figures. Our guest this week is Senator Leo Jaramillo, a fellow norteño. Senator Jaramillo is an Española Democrat who has served in the legislature since 2021. Muchísimas gracias por estar con nosotros, Senator. Thank you for joining us.
Muchísimas gracias a ustedes. Muy buenos días, Singi Tamu. Good morning. Saying good morning to you in the three languages spoken in the Española Valley, Spanish, Tewa, and of course English.
A proud northern New Mexican here.
Absolutely.
Senator, some folks might not know this about you, but you have a background in news and also worked as a middle school teacher.
That's right.
Tell us about the evolution of your professional career.
Well, I need to let you know that as a kid, I grew up watching Conroy Chino and Nelson Martinez on Channel 7. And I remember thinking, I want to be like them one day, right? They looked like me. They were doing news. And I remember thinking about them as icons as a kid. In high school, we had a News 101 program, which was run by KRQE News 13, and that was news for teens by teens. We came up with our content. We did news stories. We actually won Rocky Mountain Emmy Awards for our pieces, and so I decided if I went to school someday or a job I wanted would be to be a broadcast journalist. So I became a news writer, producer for KRQE News 13. I remember I had to write a test script for Diana Saucena. And it's so funny, Daniel, she must have definitely sent the norteño in me because she said, don't worry, bro, I'm going to read it okay. So that was her way of saying, whatever you write, I'm going to hit a home run. Got offered the job right before I graduated college. And I managed and was the news writer, producer for the news show KRQE News 13 this morning. And I, along with Kim Valles, the former anchor, we raised the ratings by 2 points. After doing news for a while, I transitioned from the newsroom into the classroom. I taught in Belen. Belen Middle School had a full news set. They had a weather station, they had a sports station, they had a news desk, state-of-the-art editing equipment and cameras, but no one to teach the class. And so I got asked by the principal, Jeff Sullivan at the time, to come out and teach, and I took him up on that offer. It was a 2+1 program, which means I had a bachelor's degree, so I could go into the classroom and teach on an alternative license. And then I earned my master's degree in education with my teaching license at the same time, and taught in Belen before I was recruited back to the Los Alamos National Laboratory.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that. What do you do at Los Alamos, if you can talk about it?
Oh, yeah, this one I definitely can. I'm the staff operations manager, which is basically the chief of staff. And so I do that for the associate laboratory for facilities and operations at the laboratory. And it's been an amazing ride and a great job that's been flexible for me to serve as senator.
Well, how do you juggle your work duties with your work here at the Capitol? Because, I mean, it sounds like you've got a full plate at Llano.
Very carefully. So here's what I do, Daniel. I wake up really early, and I put in 3 hours before I come to the Roundhouse. And so that's checking email, flagging action items, looking at anything that I think might need attention. And then I get ready. I'm at the Roundhouse between 8 or 8:30, and then I try to sneak in a 4th hour somewhere in the day. I need to try to do 20 hours. And Llano is okay however I split it up. If I do 6 hours on a Saturday, if I do 2 hours one day, as long as it totals up to 20 hours. Now, here's an interesting fact, Daniel. If I wouldn't be working part-time to get those 20 hours in, which brings some income in, if I went leave without pay from the lab, I would then have to pay them something like $1,700 a month to keep my benefits. Well, I can't afford that because we don't get paid as legislators.
Right.
You know, the assumption by so many norteños is I'm making a lot of money by being both senator and a lab employee. The truth is it's the love of community and people that lets me be a volunteer senator, and it's the love of the laboratory that gets me paid.
Senator, when you were in high school, did you set out to either go into broadcast news? Like, what was your plan in high school?
Well, the plan for sure was to be a broadcast journalist, but I didn't know you needed a college degree because the deal was I didn't want to go to college. I was actually told by somebody in the school system that I couldn't ever attend college, that I might think about a trade program. So college was never something I thought of. Jaramillos typically earned their high school diploma and did one of two things: graduate, stay living at home and contribute to the family, family or graduate and make it on your own as you moved out. But things definitely changed through Los Alamos National Laboratory and a co-op program that I was in. I had two mentors, Daniel. Their names were Joseph Ortega and Bill Watt, who are still good friends to this day. I mustered up the courage during my high school co-op year, asking if they'd hire me full-time, right? I wanted a full-time job. You know, Norteños, if you were that age and you thought about the laboratory and a job, you hit the jackpot.
Sure.
And so those mentors asked me to see them the following day, which I did. Went into the conference room thinking I was going to be offered employment. They broke the news that they wouldn't hire me, but they had two applications, one to the University of New Mexico, the other for financial aid. The conference room phone was on the center of the table. They had already had the conversation with my parents the day before that education would be the key to my success. And they took the time that full afternoon. We filled out those two applications, questions they couldn't answer. They called my parents. We drove to the Los Alamos post office. And I remember, Daniel, I didn't want to put those two envelopes in. I didn't even have the $50 for the then application fee, which Joseph Ortega had a money order. And we put those envelopes in the mail slot. And I remember that they told me, Leo, education will be the key to your success. And now I can proudly say it has been.
I've read you talk about how you've been very fortunate to have mentors in your life and how they help shape who you are today, and how that relates to your role as a former cheerleader at the University of New Mexico as well as in high school. And you've also coached cheer and dance. How did cheer shape who you are and who those and the people that were involved in cheer?
Oh, how amazing is that? Thanks for bringing that up. You know, cheer had a major impact in my life and still does. When your team's losing, you're still smiling and you're still cheering the team on. Cheer really gave me the confidence that I needed. It helped me really come out of my shell. It built a solid foundation for me to truly believe in myself and to know that I was good enough. And cheer and my cheermates did that.
Senator, as an openly gay man representing what folks would consider a traditional Norteño community, are there challenges that come with that?
Are you kidding, Daniel? You know what's so amazing to me is when you think about gender roles and those stereotypes of gender roles, that when I'm walking through Center Market, the local grocery store, that when those quote unquote machismo men will come up to me and hug me and thank me for something and then ask their children if they've hugged me, that the community embraces me as their senator without the label of being a gay man. And the beauty of that is they see how much I care for the community, that they don't see me as a gay senator. They see me as a senator who cares. And I see them as people I'm proud to represent, but I see them as family.
Switching back to the goings on of the Capitol, you're serving this year as Majority Caucus Chair. Exactly what does a caucus chair do, and are you enjoying the new role?
You know, I'm really loving the role, and what the caucus chair role is to bring the Democrats together when we meet. So the caucus can meet about anything about legislation that we're thinking about introducing, current legislation. We can talk about the budget, but what happens in caucus, Daniel, stays in caucus.
I was going to ask you if you could shed some light on what happens behind those closed doors.
But what the role of the caucus chair is to ensure that the meeting flows, ensure that you see who has questions by keeping an order of who's next to ask questions. If we're running out of time, ensuring that we wrap it up. So it's kind of a lot of being what I was when I was the chair of the county commission, leading the meeting and steering it in the way that we stay on topic and that we stay within time and ensuring that we keep decorum and that everything moves smoothly within the Democratic Party.
Senator, you mentioned your service with the Rio Arriba County Board of County Commissioners. How did you get involved in politics?
Believe it or not, I had a fourth grade teacher. It was the governor's race in 1986 who did a week-long lesson. Her name is Angela Maestas, who still remembers this. And we did everything from what it was to campaign and to that Friday leading up to that last session where she told us, if you're an elected official, you can help the people in your community. Well, I come from very humble beginnings that getting help was okay, right? There was no shame in it. And I remember fourth grade Leo Jaramillo proudly stood up and he said he would win an election one day to help the people in the Española Valley. When I ran for the Senate position, Miss Maestas wrote a letter to the editor that said she remembers that fourth grade student who proudly stood up, said he would win an election to help people in Española, and she asked fellow New Mexicans or Norteños to step up and help that fourth grader's dream dream come true. So the seed was planted since then.
Wow. I love it because I have just wonderful experiences with teachers that I'm even to this day still friends with. So let me ask you Rio Arriba County Commission, State Senate, do you have aspirations for higher political office?
Oh, it's amazing that I'm hearing from so many people around the state asking if I'd consider to run as lieutenant governor this coming time around. But, I'm really loving the role that I'm playing as the senator in District 5. And so as of right now, I'm staying exactly where I am. But whatever the future holds, I can see me one day leading the state of New Mexico with a lot of Norteño pride and with a lot of heart. And I think that's exciting.
Well, don't forget about Daniel Chacón and giving him exclusive interviews when you do. Senator, what's your overall assessment of the session so far? Are lawmakers making good progress on legislation that will improve the lives of New Mexicans?
Good question, Daniel. You know what? I'm really thinking about behavioral health and those 3 big bills that we passed out that the governor immediately signed is a step in the right direction for New Mexicans. For years, mental health was something that we struggled on addressing and getting the proper legislation written and passed, and now we've done it. And that's a huge win for New Mexicans, and I'm proud of that.
We've also heard from New Mexicans who are interested or actually really demanding from lawmakers that they pass more public safety measures. Time is sort of running out here at the Capitol. Do you think that we'll see more crime bills reach the floors?
I think we may. And one actually passed that I carried, I don't know if you saw it yesterday in the chamber, but it was getting law enforcement on the blue buses in northern New Mexico. So to ensure that riders feel safer, the RTDs or the regional transit districts can then hire somebody who would become a peace officer. When you think about the 10,000 miles the blue bus covers, the counties, the tribal lands that it goes into, these peace officers would ensure that they can keep the safety of those riding buses. So that's a Norteño public safety measure that definitely passed and is headed to the House. And my good friend, Representative Cristina Ortez of Taos, will be carrying that bill on the House side, and I'm hopeful that one passes.
Senator, speaking of pieces of legislation, I counted some 27 bills or other pieces of legislation that you're sponsoring this year, including one that would create a lowrider capital of the world license plate. What was the genesis of that proposal, and what has been the reaction so far?
Daniel, people all over the state love it, but I need to remind people who are listening that a lot of times when you hear me introduce myself, I'll say I'm Senator Leo Jaramillo, a proud native son of the beautiful Española Valley, the lowrider capital of the world, where we're brown, we're down, and we're low to the ground. The lowriding community has contributed so much to Española. They help with coat drives, with food drives. They're present so much in the community, and we're so proud of our lowrider history and culture. In the 1980s, MTV coined us the lowrider capital of the world, and we've proudly held on to that title. People from all over the world come to check out lowriders in Española, including 60 Minutes, which did a segment about lowriding. I wanted to shine some light on the Española Valley. I had somebody say I was wasting my time and energy with a lowrider license plate bill. I asked the individual if he's from Española, and he said no. And I said, I am. And, for a long time, people thought it was okay to ask people from Española if we could be told an Española joke. Well, we don't think they're funny. And so what this bill does is it highlights my community. It highlights the pride we have in lowriding. And kids who might feel defeated in the Valley right now, who have their head down because of these jokes, when they hear their senator connect to them with being brown, down, and low to the ground and having a license plate bill, their little heads pick up a little higher. And when they see that license plate bill highlights who we are as people and the pride that we have in the culture of lowriding, their heads pick up a lot. And it's going to be a big win for people in the Valley that shows that we respect the culture, we respect the art form, the science behind lowriding, that it's going to be what some people think of wasting some time, a major win for the Valley. And I'm just getting started. We're going to build upon that success, that by the time these kids who felt what it is to have somebody ask about a joke, that by the time they're my age, no one's going to be asking that anymore.
And that license plate would be available basically to anyone. Like I could drive my, not that I have a Prius, but if I had a Prius, I could drive my Prius.
You could show your lowrider pride with your Prius. It's going to be for tow trailers, for motorcycles, for your standard vehicle. It's going to be a great license plate. Even an article was written in South China about the lowrider and the lowrider license plate. So it's pretty exciting.
Sweet. Do you have a lowrider, or are there plans for Senator Leo Jaramillo to be driving a lowrider in the future?
Oh, I'm ready to drive a lowrider right now. But here's the thing. I don't own a personal one, but the entire lowrider community always tells me to pick which vehicle I want and cruise it whenever I'm ready.
Well, call me after the session. I want to go cruise España with you.
Let's do it. We're ready. We'll take an official cruise with the lowrider capital of the world in an official lowrider, and we'll take some photos for that.
Fantastic. Well, Senator, it's been so much fun spending time with you this morning. I know it's kind of a race to the finish now, so I know time is limited here at the Capitol. So thank you. And before we go, am I missing to ask you anything you'd like to add about this year's session?
The only thing I want to say is it's also amazing that high school co-op kid who was impacted by mentors at Los Alamos National Laboratory. I think of the lab and Los Alamos as my second home. So to be able to be Los Alamos' senator brings me so much pride because of those mentors that invested in me, that now I can invest in my time and my energy to proudly represent Los Alamos, and my Norteño roots with acequias and land grants to proudly represent Tierra Maria and Cevoya, Abiquiu, that my entire life experience is wrapped up in one Senate district. I think of my district as my child because I don't have any of my own, and I'm raising it the best way that I can, Daniel, with as much love and respect as I can give it, and I can't wait to see what happens to this baby when we're here even several more years from now.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about some of the big stories of the week.
This is Patrick Dorsey, publisher of the Santa Fe New Mexican. Looking to reach a wider audience and grow your business? For 175 years, the Santa Fe New Mexican has been the trusted voice of Santa Fe, with unmatched local reach in print and online. In addition to our long-standing, independent, family-owned newspaper, we have a full-fledged marketing team with the expertise to help you succeed in the 21st century. From traditional print to precision-targeted digital advertising, we have the tools to connect you with your ideal customers. Partner with us and see the results for yourself. Advertise with the Santa Fe New Mexican and unlock your business's full potential. Visit us at santafenewmexican.com/advertising or call us at 505-995-3852. Thank you.
We're back with Around the Roundhouse. I'm your host, Daniel Chacón. One of the ongoing topics of discussion at the state capitol is what's happening at the federal level and potential funding cuts that could trickle down into the state. The Senate Finance Committee this week received a report on that very issue from the chief economist from the Legislative Finance Committee. My colleague, Margaret O'Hara, was there. What did you hear, Margaret?
So in general, what we learned from the Senate Finance Committee's Monday morning meeting were two things. First, New Mexico is on relatively stable ground in terms of revenue. Projections are consistent with what they were back in December. But second, cuts to federal funding pose a more immediate risk to the state's budget. However, we don't yet know the full extent of what those federal funding cuts are going to look like. That's going to be debated in Congress over the next several weeks. And many of these federal funding cuts stem from the U.S. House budget resolution, which would provide $4.5 trillion, with a T, $trillion in tax breaks and $2 trillion in spending cuts. That was passed by congressional Republicans in late February. And so within that resolution, there's essentially a list of cuts that each House committee needs to make over the next 10 years. We've got $230 billion from a committee on agriculture, $880 billion from the Committee on Energy and Commerce, and $330 billion from the committee overseeing education, to name a few.
So what are we looking at in terms of the impact to New Mexico? I know you said sort of it remains to be seen, but are there any predictions so far?
Sure. So those three big buckets of money that I mentioned include some pretty important stuff, especially for the state of New Mexico. And First, we should talk about Medicaid, which provides health coverage for low-income Americans, including about a third of adults in New Mexico and an even higher percentage of New Mexico children. Essentially, that $880 billion in cuts for the Committee on Energy and Commerce is where we might see potential cuts to Medicaid come from, since we know that committee, despite its name, oversees both Medicare and Medicaid. For his part, though, Senator George Munoz, who heads the Senate Finance Committee, said he doesn't believe Medicaid is going to get cut based on his experience talking with financial leaders from other states. Another cut I want to mention is one to school meals. I mentioned that $330 billion in cuts in the next 10 years is expected from the committee overseeing education and the workforce, and that would include school meals, which is another big one for New Mexico, given that the state has a law on the books to provide universal free school meals to all K-12 students. So in addition to state contributions, we really rely on federal dollars to make universal school meals happen. And the Senate Finance Committee estimated that the state might have to pick up the lunch tab for more than 500 schools, depending on the extent of these cuts. But remember, we don't know yet what the specifics of the cuts will be. So right now, we're looking at what the state might expect, not what the state should expect.
So, Margaret, the question that I'm sure taxpayers across New Mexico will be asking, what are lawmakers doing to prepare?
Well, we know that New Mexico's congressional delegation has really been sounding the alarm on this and expressing concerns in a variety of different ways when it comes to, Medicaid, funding for tribes, nations, and pueblos, basically all across the board. They've been working on that. Here at the state capitol, lawmakers have been looking at how some of this might affect them as well. We know Finance Committee officials are going to be giving regular updates. There is a House memorial out there to have the Legislative Finance Committee study the impacts of federal funding cuts on the state. And actually, the state Senate on Wednesday unanimously passed legislation to build up a $2 billion Medicaid trust fund over the next several years to really shore up the state's Medicaid funding. So we're seeing some action happen, but we're still in sort of an informational limbo since we don't know yet what these federal funding cuts will entirely mean.
Well, we'll be here to report on what comes down the road. So thank you for joining me, Margaret. As always, I appreciate your thorough reporting.
Of course. Happy to help.
In related news at the Capitol, the Senate unanimously approved a measure to create a new state Medicaid trust fund. Senate Bill 88 would, over several years, build up a $2 billion pot of money to then match federal dollars, especially if the state sees cuts. The proposed trust fund is one of several the legislature has created to turn what lawmakers call now money, which is largely driven by the oil and gas industry, into future money. On the House side, one of the big stories of the week came after the House approved, also unanimously, 3 bills designed to bring greater oversight and accountability of the New Mexico Children, Youth, and Families Department. As one child welfare advocate told me, the unanimous approval shows lawmakers have grown tired of waiting for the state's troubled child welfare agency to reform itself. With just 2 weeks left of the 60-day session, it's a race to the finish at the Capitol, where floor sessions are lasting hours and committee meetings are going into the night. Expect more of the same in the next week, and expect a strong presence from the New Mexican as well. Thanks again to Senator Jaramillo for joining us in our latest episode, and thank you for listening to Around the Roundhouse. Join us each week as we share the latest from the Capitol by subscribing to our podcast through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. The New Mexican has a devoted team of reporters and photographers at the Capitol every day during the 60-day session to provide you with the latest developments. Follow our coverage online at santafenewmexican.com, where you can also subscribe to our political newsletter, The Roundhouse Report, for updates sent directly to your inbox. Until next time, I'm Daniel Chacón, and this has been Around the Roundhouse.